Okay, we're doing CPLR 302, personal jurisdiction by acts of non-domiciliaries. And I can't believe that I skipped over this one because this one is a doozy, particularly the beginning of it. So acts which are the basis of jurisdiction as to a cause of action arising from any of the acts enumerated in this section, a court may exercise personal jurisdiction over any domiciliary or his executor or administrator who in person or through an agent. So, So this is specifically talking about the acts of the non-domiciliary. That's going to decide the acts that they commit will show the basis of their jurisdiction under New York State. Cause of action arising from any of the acts enumerated in this section. So they're gonna tell you specifically what. And there it's saying a court may exercise personal jurisdiction over any domiciliary or his executor or administrator. And they're saying they can do it in person or through that person's agent, right? Which could be an attorney, okay, or someone that would be accepting service for them. So, 1, transacts any business within the state or contracts anywhere to supply goods or services in the state. So that person, let's say he's from Utah and he transacts business within New York State or contracts anywhere to supply goods or services in New York State. Okay, so 2, commits a tortious act within the state except as to a cause of action for defamation of character arising from the act. So this guy Harry from Utah commits a tortious act within the state. He's then under New York State jurisdiction. Okay, again, this is about putting that non-domiciliary, someone who is not from New York State, within jurisdiction. So these acts are putting him within New York State jurisdiction. Okay. 3, commits a tortious act without the state, causing injury to person or property within the state, except as to a cause of action for, again, defamation of character arising from the act. If he, okay, it's going to go on some more description, but let's just talk about that. So this guy, Harry from Utah, he comes, he's in New York State. He punches Rob, okay, from New York State. So that puts him in the jurisdiction because he committed a tortious act, which was punching and injuring Rob within the state. Rob happens to be in Utah, where Henry, or whatever the hell his name is, whatever I said, Harry, where Harry from Utah lives. He's from Utah. Rob happens to be visiting Utah and Harry punches him in the face and injures him. He's outside of the state, but because Rob is from New York, that would put Harry in under New York jurisdiction because he committed a tortious act outside of the state. So Harry punches Rob inside New York State, under jurisdiction. Harry from Utah punches Rob from New York outside the state. He's under New York jurisdiction. So within the state or without the state, he commits the tortious act. But any action of that arises from defamation of character for either in or out the state, that's the exception. That would not put him under jurisdiction for the case of defamation of character. So let's continue. This is under number 3. When they were talking about he commits a tortious act, without the state. 1, regularly does or solicits business or engages in any other persistent, that's important, persistent course of conduct or derives substantial revenue from goods used or consumed or services rendered in the state. Those 2 phrases are very important because it's not like a one-off. Homeboy is making substantial revenue, Okay? He's deriving substantial revenue from goods used or consumed or services rendered in the state, right? And persistent course of conduct. So this is something that's like ongoing. It's not a one-off. Okay? Engages in any other persistent course of conduct. So keep that in mind. 2, expects or should reasonably expect the act to have consequences in the state and derive substantial revenue. There it is again, substantial revenue from interstate or international commerce. So what they're saying, if Harry is from Utah, he's getting substantial revenue from the dealings that he's doing and the business that he's doing in New York State, which would be interstate commerce, right? But let's say Harry was from Switzerland or he was international, right? But he's doing business and getting substantial revenue, deriving substantial revenue from doing business with people in New York State. That's intercommerce, international commerce or interstate commerce, deriving substantial revenue from it. He would then, if there was something that went awry, he would then be under New York State jurisdiction, even though he's either in Utah, out of state, or out of the country, international, okay? 4, owns, uses, or possesses any real property situated within the state. I think that's pretty obvious. So if he owns property in the state, he's within jurisdiction. Frequently uses or possesses any real property situated within the state, then he's under the New York State jurisdiction. Okay, I'm going to stop there. There is one of the questions is based on D, so let's read that. Foreign defamation judgment. The courts of the state shall have personal jurisdiction over any person who obtains a judgment in a defamation proceeding outside the United States against any person who is a resident of New York or is a person or entity amenable to jurisdiction in New York, who has assets in New York, or may have to take actions in New York to comply with the judgment for the purposes of rendering declaratory relief with respect to that person's liability for the judgment and for the purpose of determining whether said judgment should be deemed non-recognizable pursuant to Section 5304 of this chapter to the fullest extent permitted by the United States Constitution, provided 1, publication at issue was published in New York, and 2, the resident or person amenable to jurisdiction in New York, 1, has assets in New York, which might be used to satisfy the foreign defamation judgment, or 2, may have to take actions in New York to comply with the foreign defamation judgment. The provisions of this defamation proceedings outside the United States prior to and or after the effective date of this subdivision.